Use the ring, Mr. Frodo.
Oh, you see a barrel in the background here, and as soon as Faramir enters, the barrel is gone.
Here in the wild I have you. 2 halflings, and a host of men at my call.
This is exactly what Faramir says, but at the first dinner when Sam accidentally tells him that it's about the Ring of Power. But, yeah, anything that happens after this is not in the book. Now, when Faramir is getting seduced by the power of the ring, he not only sees his own glory, he sees, basically, the ring makes you see anybody else who has it or holds it or tries to take it as an evil thief, and they had makeup and prosthetics made for that to make Frodo appear more Gollum-like for this very scene. So we had a second night now, the night at the Forbidden Pool, and it's the 3rd day now. They built Helms Deep in a quarry so that they would have a set for shooting, and it's the same place where they later disassembled Helms Deep and built up Minas Tirith for the 3rd movie.
Send out riders, my lord. You must call for aid.
This is obviously nonsensical one day before the battle, but the issue here is obviously that Rohan just never called out for aid to Gondor. So it's not about where was Gondor because they needed help, it's because more the question where was Gondor because I didn't call them. And yeah. I mean, obviously, what you want to transmit in the movie is that they feel hopeless and desperate and alone, and that is all quite accurate, but it's not the fault of Gondor. In the book, the Ents take 3 days to decide that they will go to war, and they decide that quite directly and not as is shown here with first saying no and then Pippin convincing Treebeard to change his mind. And there is one Ent who has already decided he wants to go to war, who's called Quickbeam, I think. And he is accompanying Merry and Pippin for these 3 days and showing them around, because all the others take 3 days to decide. In the books, Gimli is separated from Aragorn and Legolas, and he falls back with the people who have defended the war into the Glittering Caves, which are, as I mentioned earlier, not behind the burg, but behind the open area. And he there realizes that it's a beautiful place with lots of minerals and lots of natural beauty. And he's so enchanted by it that he convinces Legolas that if he joins him in going into Fangorn, then Legolas has to join him in visiting these caves. And later, Gimli establishes a colony of dwarves living in the Glittering Caves. So we have another night now, so we would be at night number 3, and then the next day would be the 4th dawn.
What is your name?
Hallis, son of Hammermine.
He's the son of the one who got killed by the Warg, the very first one. Harleth is also a name that appears in the Silmarillion as one of the as a woman who was one of the chieftains of men.
Over the gate!
It's a great scene with the elves, and I always get teary-eyed in this moment. The music is just so well implemented here. So to cast all the elves, they hired students who would have a bit more of a slim and elegant shape and not a well-trained one. And they shaped the armor in a way that they would stop them from slouching, so that they would stand up straighter and have a proper elven posture. Also, I always got horribly confused, especially when first watching the movie, why Haldir, who is from Lothlorien, and all the elves who are from Lothlorien, gives like greetings from Rivendell. And obviously the only reason is because Elrond and Galadriel have communicated before. So he is bringing a message from Lothlorien, but the message came from Elrond. You can also see he has the glove for the archer. I think it's the first 3 fingers, index, middle, and ring finger who are gloved.
You could have picked a better spot.
I mean, it is bizarre why Gimli's not standing at one of the gaps. Yeah, that happens when you keep archers holding at full draw. The subtitles say prepare to fire. Obviously they are preparing to shoot. They do not have rifles. They cannot shoot, they cannot fire. Fire! They should also not say fire, but yeah. They are men. So the Uruk-hai have half-automated crossbows, which is something that was invented in our world in the 15th century. And so the filmmakers thought it would be would make sense to have that as an advance in of industrialization driven by Saruman in Middle-earth. Wilhelm scream. So we saw earlier how Saruman was mixing gunpowder, and as in Europe in the 15th century, this was something of a new development where in this case Saruman is the first one who invented it, so nobody at the time knew that there was something like a fire that can cause explosions and break stone. Yeah, now we see the really bad release, oh god, from Legolas. And the second one, I think that one is also really bad. Yeah, that's why he misses. I mean, if he would have shot better in the beginning of the movie, he can do it, but not here. Also, before the explosion, you could hear all the sounds being reduced step by step until there was nothing to hear, and then the big explosion. They made that in the movie so that the explosion would have a stronger dynamic contrast in the sound, and they didn't have to turn it up as much as they would have had to do if it was on top of all the other sounds. Oh, the cameo of Peter Jackson, there he is, coming up. This stunt of Legolas is not in the book. But I would say in some sense it fits into the whole thing, so I don't mind it too much. This side door that Aragorn and Gimli are going through, that is actually mentioned in the books, and there it is Éomer and Aragorn who are going through there. I don't think this would be possible in real life. I mean, you have to imagine that Gimli is fully armored, and the actor even said on in the documentaries that he was wearing, as a full-sized person, some 70 kilograms of armor. So even if it was a dwarf, if you scale that down, it'd still be 40 kilograms extra to the whole dwarf. It would definitely be too much for me to carry with one hand and then hold myself on the other arm.
Osgiliath burns. Gondor has come.
So they're looking at Osgiliath from the Mordor side. So even if you would say that this is part of the story, it doesn't even make sense that they would reach Osgiliath that way. They would probably have to go via boat over Caer Andros, the island in the north, and then reach Osgiliath from the west.
Come, my friends. The ents are going to war.
As I said before, they in the book they decide quite straightforward that they want to go to war and then march towards Isengard. But it's a good excuse here to get this really great song in the background, which is sung by I think a 12-year-old boy, and he was also the singer for some of the Harry Potter songs, I think. The Ministerith that you could see in the background, that was actually removed in the theatrical cut because test viewers thought that they would see Helms Deep in the background and that Frodo would be very close to the others, which is not the case. It was re-entered during the edit for the extended edition.
Look to my coming at first light on the 5th day.
So the way I counted it would be the 4th dawn, but as I said, the first time that is day all the time is really long, so it would count for easily 2 or 3 days instead of just 1. So initially they planned to have Theoden hold the speech here, that he in fact holds in the 3rd movie, So they changed it to a much shorter version, just to have this huge climax at a later stage. Oh, something I have not mentioned at all yet is that the orcs are usually voiced by pigs, so they're always having a certain squeal to it when they die or interact or something. Though the Uruk-hai themselves could have other animals in there as well, I'm not sure. And as I said before, in the book, Gandalf arrives from the other side of the fight, not from the left side as we look onto the castle, but from the back. And he is fighting with Erkenbrand, who is one of the captains of Rohan, I think the first marshal of the Mark. And they bring all the defeated soldiers from the battle at the fords of Isen, and they are some 1,000 or 2,000 soldiers. In the book it is mentioned that the Ents also try to attack the tower itself, but the tower was made by the Númenóreans out of a volcanic column, and it's made out of a stone that is stronger than anything the Ents can actually harm. So at some point Treebeard has the Ents to stop throwing themselves against the rock, because they're injuring themselves. This whole scene was done with an actual Isengard, but as a miniature, and they actually flooded it, so that the water you see here is completely real. It's just much, much smaller than it would be in reality. It's getting late now, so I hope the lighting will work out for this video. We'll see. So this is another instance where the ring changes the way that Frodo sees the person he's interacting with.
By rights, we shouldn't even be here.
Yeah, he's absolutely correct, because none of this is in the book. But the story that he tells now, or the comparison to the ancient songs, is in the book at the place right before Shelob's lair.
And sometimes you didn't want to know the end.
In the book, he's actually referencing specifically the story of Beren and Luthien, a story which they have listened to during their 2-month stay in Rivendell, where they heard a lot of the songs and tales of the elves. So in the book it's also the Hurons who are actually killing most of the orcs in the route here, and to also clean up the whole area of the dead of the Dunlendings, and they also bury the Erlingars that died. In the book, Legolas tells Éomer that he is hoping to have a higher count than Gimli, and Éomer tells him that if Gimli is driven to the Glittering Caves, which have not a defense as the Hornburg, then Gimli's count will be higher. So I mentioned in the watching of the first movie, Saruman has been trading with the Shire, and he has bought quite a lot of pipeweed and has been consuming it for himself a lot. Oh, and pipeweed, by the way, is not marijuana in any way. It is tobacco. So here in this extended scene they introduce the tunnel that goes under Osgiliath, which is at least a decent explanation how they get back to the other side without running through all the Mordor troops, but as I said before, just from a location perspective, it just doesn't make any sense.
Shire must truly be a great realm, Master Gamgee, where gardeners are held in high honor.
So as I mentioned, one of Sam's sons, I think he calls him Frodo, after Frodo Baggins, later names himself Frodo Gardner and establishes the family of gardeners, who will be held in high honor, just as Faramir predicts.
They say a dark terror dwells in the passes above Minas Morgul.
So the problem is, if Faramir already knows that Cirith Ungol is the name, it basically means spider's cleft. And they all know Elvish, right? Everybody in Gondor. So it's really not that difficult to understand what terror is in there. But this is a flaw that is also in the book, where Elvish words are far too often the distant mythical things, even though people in the very world are speaking them. So the book, The Two Towers, ends at quite different places. You have the first half that deals with the Fellowship minus Frodo and Sam's part, And that one ends with the chapter "The Voice of Saruman," where Saruman tries to basically bring them to their side. Well, the other half of the book, which is the part with Frodo and Sam, ends with Frodo being captured in the Tower of Cirith Ungol, which is in the middle of the third movie. So it's a bit more synchronized the way it ends here, because Frodo and Sam advance a lot more in the book than they should be if everything was happening at the same time. But also it means that a lot of the content is still missing, and that is because Faramir was introduced with such a long detour, and that just makes everything be more compressed in the third movie.
I want to hear more about Sam.
The part with Samwise the Brave is in the book part of the discussion about the story of Beren and Luthien, as I said, just before they enter Shelob's lair. That was the second part of The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you think I missed something and there's more to add, then please write it down in the comments. And I hope I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.